Hello and welcome to Scrapbooking Station. This video is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to go through some panel designs and then some offsets and then some different structures, and they're all going to have one thing in common, and that's that they're going to complement your square toppers and your square focals. So I'm going to put the camera over my shoulder and we'll get started. I want to start this video with a couple quick and easies. So we're going to do mat and layers, and we're going to introduce another square using our layer. So I've got my mat, and I'm deciding on my layers based on my topper. So my topper ended up at 3 1/4 inch square. We're going to be working with, and that's including this frame around it. So that's how I decided on both my layer. So the first thing I want to do is layer up with another square and then have the remainder of my layer be a different pattern. And so this way, just on my mat and layer piece, I've got a square and then a second pattern. And so this way, when I set my topper onto my card, it's going to sit right up in here in this square. And that's just going to make a really cohesive card. I've got more of these toppers, so I'm just going to move it around a little bit. So I'm going to move it down to the bottom. This one's at the top. Then I'm going to do one long ways that's going to be like so. So it's going to have two borders, but again, my layer is going to be the same, a different pattern on the sides, and then my square probably going this way in the middle, and then my topper piece. The other thing I'm going to do while I'm putting this together, and these are all 4 1/2 by 6, and again, that's all pretty much determined by my topper size. The other thing I want to do is introduce more than one square in my layer, and so I'm going to create a quilt-like look on this one. So I've got 6 squares. I'm going to alternate those same patterns. Got a sentiment, and I've made a smaller topper. So this finished out at 2 3/4, and so it's going to position up like here somewhere. So I'm going to put this one together also, and because my squares, or I have a 2 by 3 array of 2 inch squares, this is going to be 6 1/2 by 4 1/2 finished. So let me throw all those together and we're going to talk about them. So in this first set, your cards just finish out very quickly. So these materials actually come from Pollyanna Pickering, and so the toppers are from Wild at Heart. And then I use some pattern papers from both a different CD, so it's The Story Continues, and they come from the original World Wildlife collection. And then the paw print paper is a Hunky Dory paper from Animaltastic. I did do inserts on the inside, because when you do digital, of course, you've got all kinds of different options. Papers from there also. This is the way this guy finished out and did his insert also, so plenty of room to write. And on this guy, I made him a birthday card, so I just put another topper onto the inside. Also, I tilted him, so that's a good segue into this next portion. This next section of the video is all about offsets. And so what an offset is I'm going to create a second or more, so one or more squares. They're exactly the same size as my focus. So my focus in this case actually comes like this, and it's just short of 5 inches, so it's got this big white border. So the first thing I want to do is trim that off. And so I've got a 4 1/2 inch square. And so what I'm going to create is another 4 1/2 inch square to go on my card front. And I could use any of these pattern papers that I have over here, create a 4 1/2 inch square like so, but I'm going to make something a little bit special. So I've created a frame, and so immediately you can see that I've got something like this. The first thing I want to do is kind of try and position what size card I want to be working with. This one's going to be relatively simple, so I'm working within a 5 by 7 card frame. And obviously I've got a piece of acetate under here, so I can see through that. Okay, let me bring in a couple card bases. So I could go with this pattern paper inside a 5 by 7 and have something like so, and that's really pretty. I think I might do that. Or I can go with a solid, so introduce gray and go something like that. And that's good too, because what I have is a cutting die of poinsettias, and so I want to use some poinsettias in my card. So I'm going to use that on both of these cards. So I think the first one, what we're going to do is just, so a second 4.5 inch square. I've made my base and I'm saving this for the second piece. So it's going to be like so, and this is going to be raised up. And then on the bottom, I don't want to cover up all that pretty pattern. And so I'm just going to position this edge to edge on my card. And I'm going to make it a little bit wonky. So something like this, and then this piece is going to be like this. So let me get some of that put on there. I'm going to add the little poinsettias for embellishments, and I'll come back with this first finished piece. In finishing this out, after adding the poinsettias, I have a couple more sequins, and I'll be the first to admit this could have been larger than a 5x7. This could actually fit on an A6 card, which is about 5.5 by 8.25. So that would have looked really nice. Also on the acetate, you really can't see it unless it flashes back at you. Maybe I would have changed this to vellum. But I'm thinking in the past I've used the frame for a die cut as the offset, but that kind of doesn't have the same bounds as if you make the same size frame. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now on this one, they come with sentiment tags as well as inserts. And then I did make a second piece. Remember I cut out that piece of cardstock, and so in the second one under the frame I just took a smaller square and inserted it in there, so kind of break up the basic gray in the back. Now this is all from Kanban, and it is Monochrome and Christmas collection, and then the sequins are Ruby Rose from Paper Wishes. So that's how those two finished out. Like I said, 2 squares, same size and balance. I want to do something. I've got some Hobby House materials here, so they are really fond of squares and square toppers. And so it's got patterned papers to choose from, and also some of this pearlescent cardstock. I've already started putting that together. So I've got my matte layer. I am going to make this a little bit larger, so this is going to be a 5 by 7.5. I've already trimmed out the central topper. And so it actually came out of here, and I went as close to the design as I could, and it came to be about 3 5/8. And then I'm going to mat it. And then in this card design, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 2 smaller squares. So I'm going to have a larger square for the focal, and then I've just picked 2 patterns that I'm going to mat in white. And I'm going to stagger them like this. If you have any Hobby House, you know their claim to fame is somewhat the embellishment. So let me get this on a card and finish embellishing. Then I'm going to do a second card, and I'm going to reverse it. We're going to talk about going negative. So I'm going to cut into one card to see what's behind on the other layer. And I think you'll see that more. So let me take photos of those finished pieces and then these 2 setups, and I'll be back. This is how the first one finished out. So I added several die cuts up in here, and then some of the pearls and ribbon from Hobby House. And then I want to take a look at the second one. Actually, I want to compare the two, or look at both of them together, because the second one turned out just as pretty, intriguing, of course all the same elements. But this one, if you look at those bottom 2 layers, because I cut into my base card to reveal the first mat, what I've got is actually 2 layers for this back piece, or the panels. And then on this one, by the time I start adding the focal, I'm up to 4 layers. So it's lighter, like I said, just as good looking. Plus, I've got those little squares left over, so they make fabulous interiors. And I just used a stamp to finish these off. So materials, Hobby House, the collection's called Summer Posy. And so comes with cardstock and then the pattern papers, and then all the embellishments are kind of extra. I used a cutting die that I got off of eBay. So it's 5 petal leaves, flowers. And then the stamp on the inside is my Polka Doodle Papillion stamp set. Before I leave offsets, I want to bring back a card that I did, I think it was in the last video, but the corner. So this again, this is just a smaller square cutting die, and then these are cut 2 more squares into it. So just like these larger cards, except positioned into this bottom right corner. That's really cool. And what I want you to see at this point is that if you work with stamps or smaller die cuts, or you work with stickers, if you position it into a square, so now that your focal is not 3 independent elements, but it's kind of one grouped together element, you can use one of these card designs. So I'm going to do another offset. So I've prepared my base, and it's like so. And then when I position this, it's going to be just like this. So I know it's comfortable on my card front, and I know the design's going to look good. So let me leave pictures of all that. And next I want to move into structures that are suited to squares. And what I've gotten to start with is some Kanban pages out of an A6 popper pad. So I've got lots of pages. I want to square some of these up, and let's look at some unique structures. Okay, I did want to mention that was a craft stack from Hunky Dory, and the craft stacks come typically with a lot of little toppers, so that design works well for those. Now in this next section, all these structures have a square card front, even though the square ends up being rectangular. And so I've trimmed each of those pages to give me a square image. And so let's look at the cutaways first. So to create a cutaway, of course you're going to want to cut away a portion of your card front. You just want to make that square. So in this case I have a 4.5 by 6, and so that means I want this piece to be 4.5 inch square. So I'm going to top it like so. Of course you can go the other way. So this is a book fold where the other was a tent. So create that, and I've got some backing paper here. I just chose jewel tones for all these. So I'll put those together. Of course, when you have a cutaway long ways, you can make a twisting easel. And so that's what I'm going to do with this piece. I've got a 4.5 by 6 inch card, and I just scored it at 4.5 here, and then made my diagonal. And so I've got my jewel tone paper for that. Next, I want to look at two-piece steppers, because the stepper, or the tent portion of your stepper, can be any width you want. So make it a square. In this case, I'm going to make 4 by 6.5 inch finished cards. So again, cut my image into a square. This is a 4 by 4 front, and so I'm going to make this one a side stepper. And then I'm going to take this other image and create a center step. So go back to two-piece steppers if you want to see how that's all put together. But I've got, again, jewel tone papers to coordinate with those. And then lastly, and I don't think I've ever made this one on air, they call it a joy card. And so I'm going to work with a 5 by 7 as my base card, and then the front of my card is actually going to be the second card that goes over. So that's what I'm going to do with my boats. So let me slap all this together. I've got that coordinating paper, and I'll be back. So let's go through some of these finished pieces. So this one turned out like so, and I misspoke earlier. What I meant to say is you have a card front that's a square, but you have a rectangular finished card. And so this is how this turned out. And I really like working with rectangles to begin with, because there are elements like this cloud piece that came off the top of this where I can use elsewhere in my card. So that's how this guide turned out. Of course, I've got this one that goes the other way, so real similar with sentiments. That pad also comes with sentiments. I'm going to show you that pad here in a second. I really like this one. I actually was gutting and wanted to take this piece out to use on the inside, and decided to put the frame on the out. And so when this stacks up, let me just tilt it a little bit so the image actually continues down into my base card. That turned out really interesting as well. Of course, the steppers, steppers are really easy. I ended up trimming this one down to 6 inches, so it's 4 by 6 inches finished, because I used the other piece to come over here and kind of finish out my side stepper. So that's how that turned out. On the inside, just another sentiment. Of course, I've got matching envelopes, and I'll talk about that paper also. This guy added some die cuts. I mean, you can go ahead and embellish as you normally would. And so that was really pretty as well. And actually, when I cut out these doily sort of die cuts, I cut them out smartly so that I had an interior to inlay ones of color, and then a sentiment. Then lastly, the joy card. So my first joy card, yeah, I think I'll use that again. Ended up using a die cut to kind of trim the edge and then replace it back in, and then kind of fussy cut around the border. So that's how that turned out. Again, I've got my square card front, then open this way, and then you use the leftover piece for the interior. So, really cool. I'm going to leave photos of all of that. The paper comes from Hunky Dory, so it's Hunky Dory. I think it was from Twilight Kingdom, so a lot of jewel tones. And then this is the paper pad from Kanban, Thoughts of Summer, and so tons of images. And what I like about it, it also comes with pages of sentiments that kind of go along with everything. So again, photos, and then I've got one last segment to cover. So hopefully I've given you several ideas and lots to choose from. And kind of the point of all of this, first off, I was rooting around my Pollyanna Pickering, and I've got this little popper pad of squares. Got some sentiment. So I am going to take 6 of them. I've printed some papers. I've got 6. And I'm going to pick one or more of these designs and create a set of 6 winter note cards. Now I've been using nothing but toppers and kind of little book pages and whatnot. Well, what if I've got either a punch or a die cut? So I'm going to take my Foxy Builder punch and create a couple cards in one of these designs or more of these designs using that and that backing paper. And then lastly, stamps or stickers. So I've got these dazzles, I've got a backing paper, and again, I'm going to create my focal in a square and then apply it to one of these designs. And this way I can kind of take different things out for a spin and know I've got a design that will work, or quick and easy, like in these popper pads, just make a bunch. Now I'm not going to come back, that's all I've got to share, and I'm going to leave photos of kind of the befores and afters for these last several sets of projects, and I thank you for watching.